G'day YouTube, Warbles on the lot here. And it's the 24th of June and here I am in the forest just before sundown. Literally just before sundown. And right at the moment, a couple of days after the winter solstice, it's 4:29 p.m. and the wheelbarrow, it be empty, but hereabouts on the forest floor there be no shortage of fuel. And if I leave it here, it's just kind of like bushfire fuel. And as you can see, some of it has been ring-barked in the 1930s, having been sucker bashed back when Queen Victoria ruled the British Empire. So here we can see the hollow which radial regrowth surrounded before that was killed probably just after the First World War. That's when the outside layer of wood was ring-barked. So if we start with sucker bashed regrowth, which has then been axe cut, again and again, what we see is the thrice regrowing slaughtered trees. Stringy bark stands there waving in the breeze. Yeah? This is real. It's not deluded imaginitis. It's arboreal, archaeological forest. Forest archaeology? I don't know. It's just kind of how I see things on the little patch of the country that I pay rates on, and therefore I am responsible for. So therefore, thus and because, part of the job, contract, the responsibility, the duty, shall we say, is that if a person owns the fuel, then a person owns the fire. Therefore, thus and because, it kind of behooves me to sort of reduce the fuel load across the landscape before I take it upon myself to try and light it up. So there we go, and this is how it's done. One turns this slowly using the traditional stone axe to break the wood, which is roughly as thick as my forearm. And as you can see, if there's nobody living on the land to break up and consume the fuel, you can acquire a significantly major bushfire fuel risk. So therefore, thus and because, this method appeals to me. Even relatively large pieces of wood may be quite easily broken up into firewood, ready for loading. As time goes by. And while it's true that the Regrowth-Forest, which I pay rates on, manages to sequester something like 100 tonnes of atmospheric carbon dioxide annually. Apart from that which I choose to burn rather than allow it to compost and become methane, which is, slightly worse. And I choose not to allow to remain on the ground as forest floor bushfire fuel, because if I burn it slowly in a controlled fashion, then it's not there, it isn't available, it can't generate a sufficient flame height as to cause a crown fire, and therefore it can't kill the trees. So although I have to accept the fact that to keep the regrowth forest healthy and fire resistant, I am obliged to burn dead wood and windfalls. It's just kind of like part of the thermodynamic equation. You either allow the fuel, the potential energy to build up on the forest floor, or you get rid of it when it's cool enough and safe enough to be able to combust it without killing the forest surroundings. At least I think that makes sense. Yes? Okay. So here we have Sundown, and we have the firewood. And here we have the fire lighters, i.e. a couple of broken stringy bark branches with their leaves still attached, which is now added onto the fuel barrow load. Right, so a couple of capsizes later, and we set off towards the hut. And behold, the hut appears over the layer of firewood. And then, just before last light, we take the fire wood fuel pile and we apply it to the burner can. Of stainless steel, building up a roughly conical fuel pile before adding the firelighters onto the pyre. And then, just before lighting the fire, surely it's worth having a look at the western horizon at sunset a couple of days after the winter solstice. And this, of course, is the solar electric light. Merely one of a string which I have along my northwestern fence. These little $1 ones don't even have a reflector at the bottom. They just have 1, 2, 3 circles of plastic, and the plastic has been drilled through, and that causes sufficient reflection. They also have a spiral Fresnel lens, and these things only cost $1 each. They have a nickel metal hydride rechargeable battery about the size of a hearing aid battery, a button battery, and when the sun goes down after a full sunny day, they illuminate for about 4 hours. I have these little $1 units on the boundary fence, but on the front gate I have a pair of these $5 bollard units, and they actually have a AAA nickel metal hydride battery, and they also have a silvered plastic reflector at the bottom. And then, of course, on the northern fence there are, if you can barely pick them out, another 4 $1 specials. And the sunset just gets more sunsettier. So as we come into the clearing, we see there's another $1 special on top of the weathercock. There's a $5 bollard atop the shower and toilet. There's a 7-year-old solar rechargeable light atop the power line tower. On the tower of power there are 3 LED lights with 2 AA batteries, and there's a spotlight, both shining onto the generator hutch. As you can see, another triple LED light over the top of the outside fire, which we hereby ignite. We will regard the pièce de résistance The $7 solar light which changes colour. Isn't it glorious? $7. Manufactured in China. Delivered and sold in Glen Innes. And it's up against the firelight of the forest. Ciao.